Hi, I'm Lauren McCracken, and this is episode 7 of my podcast, Cracken's Corner, the Father's Day special. So, before we get started, I just wanted to talk a little bit about our past weekend, since I did mention in the last podcast that we would be away. We went to Cape May, New Jersey. We stayed with Andy's sister and their wonderful family. Got to see my nieces and my brother-in-law and our little cousin and my in-laws. It was really nice just to kind of change our pace a little bit and get outside and be in a different area, since we really haven't traveled much due to the pandemic. The last time we actually went on any trip really was our honeymoon last year, so it's been a minute. We had a really nice little talks in the morning. We actually got out and it was the first time I ever rode an electric bike, and that was really fun, but also kind of dangerous because I didn't know how to stop. So I almost crashed off of a small bridge, but thankfully I stopped myself in time. But it was still fun, and I would do it again. Also, I had a little moment with my little niece. She's 6, going on 7, and just the sweetest little girl. She's so funny, and she loves me so much, and I love her so much. And she was watching me put on my makeup before we went out, and she was like, "You don't have to wear makeup." And I literally almost cried, and she's like, "You look like you're about to cry." And I'm like, I might, because there's something so pure and so innocent about when especially young kids say things to you, because a lot of times they're just blunt. They just say exactly what's on their mind, and there's no ulterior motive, especially with stuff like that. She has nothing to gain from saying that. She's just being honest, and I thought that was really sweet and cute. And we had a really fun time getting to get out and go on the lake together, and we went riding around the area in the golf cart, and that was really fun. And then later on the last day, Andy and I got out to the Washington Street Mall, which is kind of like an outdoor mall in Cape May, where there's 1,000,000 stores and little cute boutiques and shops, and there's restaurants. So there's a lot of neat things to see and do there. So we kind of got to enjoy that time to ourselves for a little while. And then we stopped at Sunset Beach, which is this really cute little place in Cape May. We always go whenever we're down there, where you can find these little tiny pieces of quartz, and they're called Cape May diamonds. And so if you find them and you really want to, you can polish them up and have them cut just like real diamonds, and they look just like real diamonds. They're really beautiful. So we actually found a few Cape May diamonds ourselves, and I got a cute little pair of earrings with them in there for my mom for her birthday, so that was really sweet. So yeah, it was a really good weekend. So before I get into the subject of Father's Day, I wanted to make sure I took a moment to send some love out to everyone who maybe didn't grow up with a father present in their life, or had a really negative experience with that, because I can imagine that'd be a really hard day for you to try to deal with. And I hope that someone else in your life appears, if they haven't already, to kind of fill that role and give you something positive to hold on to, and a good masculine role model to aspire towards, and to give you a little love and support. Also, if your father has passed, one of my best friends lost his father not too long ago, and I know today, well, not today, but when this comes out, it will be Father's Day. I'm sure it's going to be a really tough day for you, and I hold a special place in my heart for you, because I can't even imagine how hard that has to be, especially if you did have a really positive relationship with your dad, and they're not there anymore. I know that they're looking down on you, and they're proud of you, and they love you. I also wanted to acknowledge all the awesome people who kind of step up as dads, whether they're stepdads, uncles, brothers, cousins, grandparents, who fill that niche for someone. I see you and I recognize that, and I think it's really wonderful and beautiful thing to do for someone. Also, all the single dads out there, because I feel like you almost never hear about single dads, but I know they're out there too, and I know a few of them myself, and you're working your butts off and doing the best you can to provide for your family, and I think that's really awesome and noble. So yeah, I really hope you guys all have like a super wonderful day and get some time with people you love so you feel appreciated, because you are, even if maybe you don't hear that very often. So our quote that I found for today: dads are most ordinary men turned by love into heroes, adventurers, storytellers, and singers of song. And that was by Pam Brown. And I kind of thought about that quote, and I was like, yeah, that sounds about right for the fathers that I know really well in my life. Like my own dad, who I'm going to talk about a lot in this episode. I think that fatherhood really brought out the best in him and has brought out the best in him. And I sort of get little glimpses of what he'll be like someday, you know, if I have kids, when I see how he is like with my nieces and stuff, and how sweet he is and how kind he is, because it's like that's the dad I remember when I was a little girl. And I just think it's such a beautiful thing. And you don't hear much about paternity, but it's such a beautiful role and such an awesome thing to be a parent and to be a father, and something that we should kind of celebrate a bit more. So my dad, there's kind of like a running joke in my family, like I am my dad and my brother is my mom. My father and I are two peas in a pod. So there's something about my dad and like his sense of humor that is super contagious, and even though he's way more of an introverted person than I am, we get along really well, and I've always been able to like talk to him about anything and come to him with any problem and feel like he'll really think about the best possible course of action for me to take and give me really good advice. He grew up working class. He lost his own father very young when he was just a kid. My grandfather passed, I believe when my dad was about 10 years old. He was one of the first people, my grandfather was one of the first people to actually have an artificial heart put in from some medical complications that he had experienced in the past because of his time in the service in World War II. So unfortunately, he didn't get to live out a very long life and spend all that much time with my dad, but he was a wonderful man from everything that I've heard from my grandmom and my aunts and my uncle and my dad, and really everyone who knew him loved him. So he still really set a good example for my dad, even if he wasn't around as long as we would have liked. My father is kind of like a big guy, which is funny because if you know me, I'm pretty small, and he seems to like intimidate people at first when they first see him, because he's like this big, you know, strong, you know, over 6 feet tall, 200 plus pounds man. You know, they think he might be intimidating or scary or something, but he's like super nice and super funny and just always wants to make people laugh and have a good time and is extremely caring. He's like the most down-to-earth person you will ever meet anywhere. It's like the first thing that people kind of pick up on, and it kind of sets them at ease because he knows how to talk to anybody. He's one of the hardest working people I've ever met in my life. There were times when he would work, 2, 3 jobs just to make ends meet for our family, when of course, you know, we were all working ourselves too, or maybe I was out of work or someone else was out of work in the household. He was always there to be like, hey, don't worry about it, I got you, and someone you can depend on no matter what. He's very creative in his own way, which I'll get into a bit. He's a lot more private than I am, and I respect that about him, but it's kind of funny because I'm sort of the opposite. I really like to talk about my feelings and discuss all that stuff. Well, he kind of keeps everything close to the chest. But he's very sentimental, super, like, friendly, extremely witty, really, really unique. He's just always been, like, all about being an individual and embracing your weirdness and kind of owning how weird you are and just being yourself all the time. Like, you don't have to put on any airs around him, and I love that about him. I've tried to embrace that in my own life and encourage that in everyone else because I see how awesome it is to be around people like that. He really gave me a big appreciation for music and getting outside into nature. He's not a musician himself, but he's always really loved music. I remember him introducing me, like, in our car rides to all these old bands and, like, really appreciating an album and just putting all of your focus onto a song and taking it in and, like, learning to live in that moment. And it's something that's influenced me a lot as a musician myself and as an artist and a writer and all that other kind of thing, because I do a lot of stuff in my own time. I always have enjoyed doing those sort of things, and it's so nice to see someone who really has that deep appreciation for everything creative, and he kind of gave that to me, so I have to give him a lot of credit for that. He really helped me feel confident and able to perform in things like orchestra when I was in high school or in choir. Some of my favorite memories with my dad, it's kind of hard to sit down and think about because I was lucky. I'm so lucky to have such a good relationship with my dad and such a loving father, because I know a lot of people who grew up with parents that were like less than ideal and that didn't always treat them with the love and the respect that they deserved. But for the most part, my dad was an amazing father growing up. And he still is, even though I'm an adult now. I remember when I was younger, me and my brother, he's like a couple years younger than me, so we grew up pretty close. And my dad teaching us how to fight and how to wrestle and how to throw a punch and like defend ourselves. He was always like very hands-on and knew how to kind of do like the rough and tumble play and stuff with us, which I think is really important for kids growing up, to learn how to do that in a safe way and to be comfortable in your own skin and kind of learn how to protect yourself and be a little bit fierce. One of the funniest like little memories I have was when I was around 10 years old. I used to get the flu like every year when I was a kid in grade school. And I remember when I was about 10, I want to say it was January, so it was very, very cold out, and I had the flu for like 2 weeks. It was really bad, and I was just home from school, up all night. I couldn't sleep, and my dad was like, hey, I'm going to stay up with you because I know you can't sleep. I thought that was so nice, and we stayed up all night watching really badly dubbed episodes of Iron Chef, like the original Iron Chef that was in Japanese, and they had these voice actors doing these really funny voices, trying to translate it into English, and we were laughing. And I remember there was a meteor shower that night, and it was like maybe 1 a.m. or something. He's like, come on outside, like put on your coat. So I put on my coat, even though I wasn't feeling like it. I was like, all right, I'll go out. So I remember looking up at the stars with my dad, and like it's just this beautiful little moment where like for, I don't know, 10, 20 minutes, I kind of forgot that I was sick, and I was just enjoying how beautiful it was. And he's like, oh, look, there's another one, and just bonding with my dad. And that was just such an awesome memory, and I felt so lucky to have a dad that wanted to spend that kind of time with me, even though he knew I was sick. And obviously I could get him sick if he spent too much time around me, but he didn't care. This is kind of a funny one. When I was older, I want to say I was like in my late teens or early 20s. I don't remember exactly what happened, but my dad likes to give pep talks, and I also like to give pep talks. And I was having a hard time with something, and my dad has a thing where he doesn't get the words right to songs. He'll misremember like phrases. He'll kind of make them up or just get them like just slightly off, but just off enough where I can usually figure out what he's trying to tell me. So I can't remember what I was dealing with, but he was like, sometimes life is just kind of crazy, and you just have to let it go. You just gotta not worry, like that song in The Lion King. And I was like, that song in The Lion King, what are you talking about, Dad? He goes, you know how it goes, Atuda Mangata. I'm like, what? He starts singing, Atuda Mangata. What a wonderful phrase. And I'm like, Dad, you mean Hakuna Matata? And he's like, yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. I'm like, no, it's not. But he does that a lot with songs where he'll have his own version of the lyrics. And it just cracks me up every time. It always makes my family laugh because he sings it with so much conviction because he 100% thinks he has it right. And it's great. It's funny because, you know, growing up in a household with my parents, I had both my parents around and my younger brother. Of course, you know, there's going to be times when you get upset, when you get emotional, when there's fights or whatever goes on in your life. And really all four of us are super emotional people. We may handle it differently, but we cry, we yell, we laugh, you know, we have a lot of feeling that comes out. And really, whenever anything super bad is happening to me, when I'm having a really hard time, my dad is always the first person to come over and give me a hug because he knows that's what I need in that moment. And like, he's always emotionally available to really step in and make me feel comforted and loved and like everything isn't falling apart, even if I feel like it is in that moment. And I've always really treasured him for that. And yeah, I just feel really lucky to have him still in my life at this point. So a couple things. I took a few life lessons from my dad, things I've learned over the years from him, from his life, from the way that he lives, from the things that he's told me, everything that I've heard about him, that I've kind of thrown a few of them together here. He's always been someone who's wanted me to know to never be afraid to be myself. And he always wants everyone to just be true to yourself, be unique, be weird, embrace your weirdness, and never just do something to go along with the group because you're missing out and they're missing out on seeing who you really are. And it's kind of boring to just conform. Like, he used to have a bumper sticker on the back of his truck back before I was born that said, "Why be normal?" And I'm like, yeah, that's my dad. In MBTI, he's an ISFP, so like that's not too surprising. They're super, usually super down to earth, but also very creative and extremely individualistic people who know how to live like a very authentic life. He taught me to really care about people, but also don't neglect yourself because you can't pour from an empty cup. He could always kind of tell when I was giving too much, which is something I tend to do when I really get into something, whether it's a habit or a job or a relationship, and be like, hey, you gotta step off a little bit and like step back and just take a day and relax and, you know, chill because you're draining yourself. And he's right. My father, probably because of the way he grew up, they didn't grow up with a lot of money, since my grandmom kind of had to go and work jobs and do whatever she could to support her family, being someone who became a single mother unexpectedly. And it sort of forced him to be a lot more practical about what he bought, about what they consumed, about how they lived. She was super frugal, and he is also pretty frugal, but it taught me to live within my means and to not spend money I don't have, to try to avoid debt at all costs, you know, at least if you can afford to. You know, if it's something that's a choice and not a sudden, say, medical expense where you have no choice. If you have to go to the hospital, you have to go to the hospital. But, you know, don't do anything lavish and ridiculous if you can't afford it, because it doesn't make any sense in the long term. You're just kind of setting yourself up for disappointment. And my father has always taught me to be creative in unusual ways. Like, he's creative, but he's not like someone who sits down and paints or writes a song. He likes to give nicknames to strangers that we see, like, in our neighborhood or, like, going to church. He'd make these big backstories up with me and kind of encourage me to, like, flex my creativity even as a kid and be like, what do you think that guy does? And, like, well, you know, where do you think he lives? Well, what do you think his job is? And just to kind of project and imagine and dream a little bit. And I think that's a really good skill to develop in yourself, whether you're very young or very old. Just an awesome thing to really use your imagination. So he's also taught me to know what you're capable of and still try to choose to be gentle and kind when you can, but know when you have to stand up for yourself, like that's okay. And it doesn't make you a bad person to say no to people sometimes. My dad is very spontaneous. He likes to keep people on their toes a little bit. I remember the one time we're sitting down, like, watching a Thanksgiving Day parade, and we were kids, and, like, I think he might have planned this a little bit, but, like, we were kids, so we didn't know. He had, like, an old undershirt on, and we're just sitting there watching it, and out of nowhere, it goes to commercial break, and he's like, ah, and he rips it off like the Hulk, and me and my brother thought it was hilarious. It made us crack up laughing, and it was just, like, a funny memory we'll always have. And, so I try to, like, take a little bit of that and keep that in my life and be a little bit more spontaneous, because I know usually I'm, like, a big planner, but I really appreciate that little bit of spontaneity. He's also one of the most generous people I've ever met, and he made it a point to emphasize to us that if you really love someone and care about them, the most valuable thing you have to give to anyone is your time. So you should be generous with your time with the people you really care about. And he was always that way with us. Even when he'd come home from work, sometimes multiple jobs, and be really tired and exhausted, if we wanted to spend time with him, or if we wanted to talk to him, or if we wanted to talk to him, or if I needed help with my math homework, especially, like, all through grade school, kind of through high school too, he would still take the time and sit down with me and help me out and really make sure that I was going to be okay before he went to bed and before I went to bed, which I thought was really nice. And it's kind of carried on through my marriage, where I try to think about it the same way. Like, if I really care about someone, which in this case would be my spouse, I never say no to spending time with them if I can. And I try to really work on that quality time as a love language. I think it's beautiful. So yeah, there's just a couple things that I learned from my dad. I know there's more and I could say more, but I'll keep a few things to myself for now. He's an incredible person. I'd love to have him on the show someday. I don't know if he'd feel comfortable with that because he's a lot more private than I am. But he would be very entertaining because he's got a great sense of humor. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to all of our subscribers and all of our viewers, everyone who's checking this out for the first time. I appreciate it so much because I really do want to try to make a difference in the lives of everyone and bring everybody up, bring up the moods, bring up your spirit, you know, and improve the world in our own little small way and just give people a little bit of support because it's a hard world out there. There's a lot of tragedy and sadness, but I'd like to think that this channel can be a beacon of hope for people and an escape from their daily lives and from whatever they're dealing with to make things better. So thank you for checking this out. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Share this with someone if you think that they would enjoy it, if it's their thing. Let me know if maybe you'd be interested in being interviewed, because I am considering having a few guests on. I would like to do that, especially if people have stories to share, or maybe they've lived like a really cool life. They have a novel experience that we can learn from. That'd be dope. So I'm all about that. If you have any questions, comments, any ideas for me, then please feel free to share them with me through our email, CrackensCornerPodcast@gmail.com, which will be on the screen for you. And yeah, have an awesome Father's Day. I'm going to be a little busy again this weekend because it is Father's Day. And also, My cousin Blaze is getting married, so I'm super happy for him and his fiancée Paris as they start their new life together. I can't wait for that. And yeah, it's going to be a great weekend. I hope you have an awesome week ahead. Thank you so much and have a great day. Bye.